Tonight, on this edition of the Small Interview, our guest is RVTV producer and host of In Their Words, Steve Dreben. Hello, Road Valley. I'm David Glamour Dave Nienow, and welcome to another edition of the Small Interview with Glamour Dave. So today is a special show in which I've got one of my fellow producer and friends here to talk about his life as a former producer and documentary producer and his current work here at the studio. So I welcome to the show my friend and fellow producer, Steve Dreben. So Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah.
Nice to be here.
So, Steve, you and I have gotten to know each other now for like the last year and a half plus as I've gotten involved here at the studio. You've proven to be a really wonderful new friend in my life and really supportive and help on my show. So,
thank you. Glad to help.
So I'm glad to have you on my show and kind of talk about your story a bit. So my understanding is that in the past you did some documentary film work and that you're a former professor.
Associate professor.
Social professor at, where were you a professor at?
University of Arizona.
Okay. And how long were you a professor there?
About 5 years.
Yeah. And then, and eventually from that you moved into doing like documentary kinds of work, is my understanding?
Very occasional, because at the time, and probably currently too, you become more of an entrepreneur where you work away from the academic world. Mm-hmm. And so you're fully on your own as a private documentary maker, or in those days, filmmaker.
Yeah. Today,
filmmaker is mainly digital, so we're talking about a different form, electronic form. So I learned on both electronic, but mainly film, 16mm film.
Right.
So that was a different kind of thing as far as the media went. It was a lot less complicated than today.
Yeah. You would think that it would be simpler with more advanced developments in technology, but really the variety of tools that have like become available has got to be a lot more involved and a lot more numerous than compared to the days when you were working in film.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. There's so many tools now, so much control possible, both within the studio or outside the studio, or in editing. And as you know yourself, there's so many wonderful advanced editing programs that you can almost create a new picture from what you have magically, and it's just amazing. And then there's all the animation possible with the editing. Mm-hmm. So definitely enhanced and very advanced people I've met lately who can do a lot of stuff that we do here, but not everybody does it.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, now, what were the kinds of documentary films that you worked on in the past?
I'll tell you a story. There was one we had on our show, which is called In Their Words. We did have a interview with a man, and you have clips of it, mm-hmm. Who is local and in the Valley and in Jackson County, who does permaculture. And the state came in, and I got some of the documentary work they did, and the audience will see it. As part of the show, they did a documentary on his permaculture, 13 acres in the Applegate, where they produce quite a bit of product, agricultural product. And then we were able to explain what permaculture was, because a lot of people don't understand it. Mm-hmm. You hear it all the time, but what is it?
Right, yeah. Well, we've got a couple of clips from that show production of yours.
Okay.
And they're both a couple of minutes apiece, and we'll just run them back to back. So if the control room could get those started, and we'll see those clips.
Great. So happy to be able to talk about permaculture anyway, because it is a subject that is confused. I think it's good. There's biodynamic farming, there's organic farming, there's everything in between, and now there is a big movement, there has been, for the last 10 years, in permaculture?
No, since the mid-'70s.
Really?
Yes.
So that was part of the late 60s. It started to change and go into permaculture?
Yes, and Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, who was his graduate student in Australia, looked at what was happening. They did their science, and they went, oh, we need to come up with something. So they developed a educational format, the permaculture design course, because they wanted to roll this thing out as fast as possible.
Did you take that course?
Yes, I took the first course on the West Coast with Bill Mollison in '82 at Evergreen State College.
Wow.
Yeah. And permaculture is different from those other things you mentioned because those are tactics, as it were, to use that word.
Tactics?
And tactics,
Yeah.
ways to do things. Where permaculture is a design methodology. It's to figure out what to do, to choose amongst the menu, as it were.
Interesting. Permaculture, where I think the confusion comes in is like you're talking about. There's all these tactics that don't seem to come together. I know there's in Southern Oregon, there's several, well, there's one in particular in the Upper Applegate, a biodynamic winery, which I happened to have gone to a few years ago. And this man was some kind of mega rich person from Wall Street that set this place up, and it was 10 acres. I think he's still there. But it is an interesting kind of, he was so proud of the biodynamic, and it cost him so much money. He must have put $100,000 into just getting the land ready for biodynamic, though it was land, and you can talk about this, that had not been touched much before.
That's important. Fallow.
Again, in the Siskiyou Mountains in southern Oregon, United States, we have Wolf Gulch Farm, designed by permaculturist Tom Ward. It's hot and dry in the south-facing valley where Wolf Gulch Farm is located, and they receive only 12 inches or 300 millimeters of rainfall per year. Winter rains fall onto their watershed and slowly soak in, eventually making their way to a spring in the gulch, where some of the water is skimmed off and diverted into a reservoir uphill of the crop areas that feeds the farm's irrigation system using gravity. You can see the aridity in the dry vegetation and hills that feed this watershed. During heavy rains, water that falls on the road surfaces is channeled into a larger reservoir. This reservoir provides further storage for summer irrigation. You can see that the road acts as a funnel for excess runoff to be delivered to the storage. The pattern of the beds and tree belts are designed to rehydrate the landscape by retaining water during storm events. The trees are also placed so they deflect frost drainage that comes down the valley, away from field crops. The trees also block hot, drying winds that flow up the valley during the day. Another pond collects water off of the barn roof, which provides complete runoff in any rainstorm. You may have noticed that the ponds here are lined with plastic on this farm. This is because the water situation is so precarious with the recent drought in this bioregion that they cannot afford to lose any water to pond seepage.
Alrighty, and we're back. That's some beautiful aerial footage in that. Now, when was that shot?
A few years ago, maybe 3 years ago.
And was that shot, that aerial footage, was that shot via like helicopter or was it drone?
I think it was a helicopter. These days, we have the great advantage in making, documentaries of using drones.
Yeah.
I mean, you could literally go to almost any store and pick up a $29 drone package.
That's right, yeah.
With a camera on it,
Yeah.
I actually saw it the other day. And the advantage to you or any of the people that we work with here that want to make a decent documentary is unbelievable now because of that.
Yeah.
Although you still have to know what you're doing, you have to have a concept and you have to lay out at least a script and you have to have all the elements, and you could talk about that go into making you know, whether it's a PSA or it's a short documentary or it's longer documentary, you have to still have the elements.
That's right. You gotta have the elements. You gotta have you have to have it well planned to execute the best quality product. But it is amazing how the technology continues to advance and the pricing continues to go down.
Right.
You know, it's possible to find action cameras in the vein of like the original GoPro cameras, which are still kind of a bit on the spendy end of things. You know, like $300-400 for some of the higher end GoPro action cameras. But it's possible to now find GoPro style action cameras for like less than $50.
And you know, you make a good point too, because when you're making documentary, and most documentary makers, you know, don't have oodles of money to work with.
Yeah.
So you try to get as good a documentary product out there as you can. And as you say, you know, with hardly anybody knows the difference between a $50 drone camera and a several $100 drone camera.
Yeah, it's my best friend who lives in Vegas, who's been a pro photographer for years. Back in the day, he would do aerial video from a helicopter for real estate projects that he'd get hired to do. And that type of work has like totally been abandoned in place of using drones. And he has, last time I checked, his drone's like on the high end, like around a $1,500 kind of style drone. But you know, it's you know, it's just amazing the range in pricing in those kinds of tools. Get the majority of the television audience, the viewing audience, their ability to distinguish the quality coming out of one versus another is kind of like really difficult for them to do these days.
Yeah,
You know?
and you'll notice that, you know, when the public watches YouTube or Vimeo, some of the stuff that's on there now is done with these cameras or done with Canon 1080 cameras, you know, video cameras, or even you know, regular Canon still cameras, because they have video capability, are marvelous. Yes, they're short pieces, under 7 minutes in Vimeo's case.
Right.
But I mean, some of the stuff that I see on there looks extremely professional, and a lot of that has to do with the editing too.
Yep. Yeah, and the range of editing tools is really incredibly diverse out there in the marketplace. I mean, you get your cell phones, your iPhones, and the various smartphones. They'll often have some kind of a video editor software app already installed on the phone.
Right, right.
And with all the pre-designed templates and filters and stuff that you can play around with in those apps. I mean, they're might be considered inexpensive, but you can actually produce some really kind of cool looking stuff.
You know, I think you do, because you've been at, and other producers here, they've been at, you know, doing outside work too, where I think a good combination is like what you're doing today. You're taking outside media work, film work. That was not really a documentary. That was done as a PR piece with the permaculture.
Yeah.
But the idea was that you see the farm, you see that they have solar, and the host, he was talking about what they do, what permaculture is. So it was a mixed production.
Yeah.
But those are good, because I think the public likes inside, outside, and something that's moving. You know, you got to get something moving.
Yeah.
And so when you get an aerial shot like that, it's worth something.
Yeah.
That happened to be with a helicopter, but the drones are great, like you're talking about.
Yeah, and you know, and with the quality of the tools that are available today, you know, it's amazing for how much little money you need to have to kind of just begin to kind of start making some nice looking video kinds of products. And then when you've got opportunities here, like here at RVTV with the studio and field production classes that people can go through,
Right.
And learn the basics of production, show production, and field production, it really doesn't take much of an effort and or major expense to kind of get to a point to kind of begin to produce some nice quality stuff.
Well, you have a background in photo, you know, and to some degree photojournalism. Now that happens to be a whole different, you know, area, because in photojournalism, you know, you're taking like a war correspondent that's in Afghanistan, and you have a true high-level photojournalist. Some of them embedded, and most of them embedded, meaning that they're embedded with the Army or one of the services, and they have to be embedded because there's really no way to go out there as an independent and probably not get killed by a stray something, you know. But some of the marvelous stuff that comes out of there, dangerous stuff, in photojournalism, the whole documentary kind of area, and that's relatively simple. They're not using drones generally out there. They're using cameras. They're using regular still cameras. They're using video cameras, and then they're using people who are the interviewer with a camera person and a sound person on the sides. So they're making, like this interview show, a mini product, you know. But it can be sold or it can be directed by, you know, AP or whoever picks it up. So there's all kinds of different areas in documentary, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and you know, and it's like I've got a documentary project that I've been developing on the Table Rocks for quite a while, and you know, and I got some really wonderful aerial drone footage from our fellow producer and friend Jim Falkenstein, who did some wonderful aerial drone footage of the Table Rocks, and that's being incorporated into the full-blown documentary project. But it's going to be, you know, a really detailed examination of the whole story of the Table Rocks when it's all done.
How long is the documentary?
Well, I'm going to plan it out to probably be about close to a couple hours, because it's going to be like, you know, talking about the geological origins of the Table Rock. We're going to talk about the social history around the Table Rocks, the Native American cultural history around the Table Rocks, modern management issues around the Table Rocks. So there's going to be a lot going into it, but it's going to be, you know, a nice documentary. The little campaign video that I've created to promote the documentaries, actually, I've submitted it out to some film festivals in the last several months, and it's earned like 4 film festival selections and awards. Just the little campaign video to promote.
That's on the one on the Table Rock.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm really looking forward to its final completion. Hopefully that kind of comes to fruition sometime by the end of this year.
Well, it shows that, you know, people that are students or non-students, we have many people that are, you know, older people like you, I mean, that get into documentary format, studio documentary format, or in your case, you carry it farther and you're now in the process of putting together a whole documentary. Yeah. And you have help by people, advice from people in RVTV and the school, SOU, and groups that are associated with our groups. And I think that's marvelous that kind of quality is available to us. You know, that it's not just what it seems.
Yeah. You know, it's because my role before I ever came here to RVTV was being a photographer, a model. So, you know, I come to here with the idea that I was going to finally try to learn past basic photography that I've been doing and learn some video production. And I have found that, you know, with the classes offered here at RVTV, the learning process here at the studio, with all the producers being so supportive of each other, that it's been a really great learning ground to kind of get those skills that allow you to begin to imagine ideas like my wanting to take on the task of producing a documentary on the Table Rocks and finally feel like, wow, that's something I can actually do, you know, just because of my experience here, having the help of fellow producers like you and everyone that's helping with the show today.
And, you know, the thing is that you can grow if you want to grow, and that goes for everybody that participates in the courses that they teach here, and then you become a producer, and then you work in the studio usually, or out of the studio, and then you get your 18 hours plus the field production. This is a good thing, and particularly if you want to carry it on further, as many of us have, you know, or will in the future, you know. And I think it's important. It's an important part of the community and the cooperation is what you're talking about. And you know, 30 years ago, there wasn't such a thing. There was public access TV, but a lot of us didn't really understand what it was, what it did. I worked for PBS for a while, and that's a whole different thing, you know. Yes, it's supported to some degree, more now, actually, by the public than it was then, because the Corporation for Public Broadcasting supported 80% of it. We had a documentary that we did some years ago, and it was called Huichol People of Peyote. And it was an hour documentary about the Huichol Indians that lived in Nayarit, Mexico. And that documentary went pretty far. It went to the New York Film Festival. It came in third. And that's a big festival, a really big festival. And you know, I was surprised. I was there at the time, and that it did so well. But then that's another thing. You got to be ready for the distributors. And in those days, the distributors were the power. I mean, you could be sitting at the table with your friends and talking and waiting for a distributor to pick up your film. And but if they didn't, you weren't going to get the kind of distribution that you would even be able to pay back the costs of doing the production. And there are a lot of stories connected to that. And you don't have much of a position. In those days, you were lucky to get 25%. Well, if you didn't think that was enough, you wouldn't get anything. So, you know, there's all kinds of elements in that business. There still are. It's like the music business that way. You know, a lot of people lose their shirts, and a few make big money.
But there are, you know, in the recent years, you've got like a wider level of distribution ability channels out there for people to find and get stuff out there that's independently produced and be able to get wider opportunities.
Well, it's because of YouTube, you know, Instagram, Vimeo, and a lot of places where you can be seen, and then from there it can grow. You can be picked up, or you could be part of something else. That is what's important about now. And I think it's great. You know, I think that's great.
As we kind of get close to wrapping up, I want to ask you, what was it that brought you here to the Valley and got you to developing your show In Their Words? What was your the genesis?
Being here to the studio or to the programming? I was always interested. I had a show many years ago that was a critique of films and TV. And so I had a little experience anyway of being a host. So that's one of the things. I never planned to be host, by the way. There was another person at the beginning, 4 years ago, that wanted to be host. But I became the host because, as you know, sometimes people who volunteer, you know, drop out. They have other things to do.
That's right.
But I felt it was important. RVTV, the community aspect of it was very important. So we do, just like with permaculture, we try to include much of our activity based on community things that are going on, like the art show about the young people that we've done. You and I have done 4 particular shows on that. Very important that you include heart-rendering elements of the community, if you can, in your shows. And I know you do research on it too. And so you try to bring that unknown element in our community that's great sometimes. Like even the shows that we have on animals, or some very good shows that are on, you know, and make the public aware of it. They learn, you learn, and you have something that nobody else has, especially these days where we're getting squeezed communication on our major networks, et cetera.
Well, it's Steve, it's been really great being able to talk to you about your work, and where are we at in the time, so that Is there anything else? Is there anything else as we kind of wrap up? That else? Okay, we got a couple minutes left. So, is there any final ideas that you want to express before we kind of wrap this up here?
Yeah, I think that just if you are interested in TV and you're interested in video, you're interested in digital work, you're interested in photographic work, that being involved right in your own community. We're lucky we have this facility.
Yes, we are.
We really are, because, you know, I was in San Diego for a while, you know, more than 20 years ago, and they never had anything like this. It was old public television or commercial television or something related to the Navy, the Marines, or the Army. But there wasn't anything like, at the time, of community access TV.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a great platform if people want to learn a lot or little about the business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a great resource here in the community, and it certainly has been a wonderful thing for me, and it's given me an opportunity to meet and develop a whole new base of friends, such as you and everyone that works here at the studio. So
thank you. And we always thank the many people that work for us, as you will, and I think that's important, because the people on the camera, the people in the control room are just as much part of the show as we hope the audience.
That's right, yeah. Well, Steve, thank you very much for coming on to the small interview.
You're very welcome.
And I thank you for all the help that you've given me in the last 20 months as I've been doing my shows here. So I thank you very much for that.
I'm glad I could be of help.
Right. And so this kind of wraps up our small interview with Glamour Dave. In addition to thanking Steve for coming on as my guest, I thank my crew for being here and helping with the production of the show. And so this is our wrap up, and we will see you next time, Road Valley. And that's it for this edition of the small interview for tonight. We're always eager to hear what you have to say, so follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and support this show at our Patreon page at patreon.com/GlamourDave. You can send us your comments to viewer@glamourdave.com.